Hi, 5th graders. Welcome to Lesson 9.3, Graph Data. The essential question for this lesson is, how can you use a coordinate grid to display data collected in an experiment? Now, go ahead and open up in your Go Math workbooks to Lesson 9.3, found on page 187, and let's get started. Now, let's take a look at question number 1 together. It says, graph the data in the coordinate grid. So I see, first of all, my data located in my table, and then I see over here that I also have my coordinate grid. So I'm going to have to take the data that's found in my table, and I'm going to have to graph that data in my coordinate grid. Now, when I look at the data in my table, called outdoor temperature, what I notice is I see that my data are measured in two ways. They're measured in time, by hours, and it's also measured in temperature in degrees Fahrenheit. Now, since I notice on my coordinate grid that time, measured in hours, is the x-axis or the horizontal axis, I'm going to label the first row of the data in our table as x. So next to hour, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to label that as x. So I remember that those numbers will be my x-coordinate in my ordered pairs. Now, I also notice that temperature, measured in degrees Fahrenheit, is the y-axis or the vertical axis in my coordinate grid. And so I'm going to label the second row of my data, temperature, as the y. So we're going to go ahead and next to temperature, we're going to write down that that's going to be our y-coordinate. Now, my first job is this. Number 1, part A says, write the ordered pairs for each point. So what I'm going to do is, from my table, I'm going to take my x-coordinates and put them together with my y-coordinates to create my ordered pairs. So my first coordinate would look like this. I'm going to take the 1, which represents 1 hour, and that's going to become my first x-coordinate. So I'm going to go ahead and write down 1, and then I also know that this 61, which represents my temperature in degrees Fahrenheit, is going to be my first y-coordinate. So I'm going to write down 61 as my first y-coordinate. So what that tells me is, in hour 1, the temperature was 61 degrees Fahrenheit. Now I'm going to go ahead and do that with the next set of data. So at hour 3, I know that my temperature was 65 degrees. So I'm going to go ahead and make that my second set of ordered pairs. So we're going to go ahead and write down 3 as my x-coordinate, and then 65 as the next y. And once again, that means at hour 3, the temperature was 65 degrees Fahrenheit. Now I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next set of numbers. I have hour 5 at 71 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm going to go ahead and make that my next set of ordered pairs. So I'm going to write down 5 as my x-coordinate and the 71 as my y-coordinate. And once again, that tells me that at hour 5, the temperature was 71 degrees Fahrenheit. Now I'm going to move on to my next set of data in the table. So I have hour 7, and at hour 7 it was 75 degrees Fahrenheit. So we're going to go ahead and make that our next set of ordered pairs. So here's our 7 and 75. Now I have one more set of data here, which is 9 hours, and at the 9th hour, it was 77 degrees Fahrenheit. So we're going to go ahead and make that our last set of ordered pairs. So at the 9th hour, our x-coordinate, it was 77 degrees Fahrenheit, which is our y-coordinate. Now our next step is going to be this. We're now going to have to graph all of our ordered pairs, 1 and 61, 3 and 65, 5 and 71, 7 and 75, and 9 and 77, we're going to graph those ordered pairs on our coordinate grid. Now remember, when I graph, I have to remember that we always move along the x-axis first, the horizontal axis, and then we move up the y-axis. So what I'm going to do is, in starting with 1 and 61, that tells me that I'm going to have to move over from the origin. Remember, 0, 0 is the origin. I'm going to move over one place, and then I'm going to move up and I'm going to find 61. Well, there's already a point graphed for us at 161, and if you notice, that point at 61 is just a little bit above the 60. So we have our first ordered pair, 1 and 61, already graphed here for us. Now our next ordered pair was 3 and 65. So what that means is, from the origin, we move over 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to move up the y-axis until we're close to 65, which should be right in the middle of our 60 and our 70. So we have our second point graphed here for us as well. So that's the 3rd hour, which measured the temperature at 65 degrees. Now we're going to take a look at our 5 and 71. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to come from the origin, and I'm going to start moving along the x-axis, and I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now we're at 5. Now my y-coordinate is 71. So from the 5, we're now going to move up to right above the 70 and locate 71. So here's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, and I'm going to go right above that 70 to make it 71, and I'm going to go ahead and graph that point. So I'm going to go right above that 71, and we're going to go ahead and graph that point right about here. So there is our 5 and 71. Remember, that's over 5 and up to our 71. Now our next ordered pair is 7 and 75. So from the origin, I'm going to move over 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then I'm going to move up to our 75. So here's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. Now I'm going to go right in the middle of that 70 and that 80, and that's where I'm going to graph that 7, 75. So let's go ahead and graph that point together. So we're at 7 and 75. So we're going to graph that point right about there. So we now have 7, 75 graphed. Now our last ordered pair is 9 and 77. So from the origin, I'm going to move over on my x-axis. I'm going to move over 9 spaces. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now, our y-coordinate is 77. So we're going to move up 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. Now our 80 is right here, so we're going to come down right below that 80, and we're going to make that 77. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to graph that ordered pair at 9, 77. So right kind of down below the 80 is where our 77 would be. And we have now graphed the ordered pairs for each one of our points. Now let's take a look at question number 2. I have a table, and in that table it says windows repaired. And they give me the number of days in the first row, and then I also have the total number of windows repaired in the second row. And what they asked me to do for part A is we have to write the ordered pairs for each point. Now, what I'm going to do first is this. I'm going to label the days as our x coordinate. So I'm going to go ahead and put an x next to day, and next to the total number repaired, I'm going to make that our y coordinate. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write the ordered pairs for each point. So for day 1, I know that there were 14 windows repaired. So I'm going to go ahead and put those together, and my first ordered pair is going to be 1, 14. And once again, that represents day 1, and on day 1, or after day 1, there were 14 windows that were repaired. Now I'm going to move over to day 2. And after day 2, I know that there were 30 windows repaired. So I'm going to go ahead and make that my next ordered pair. So I'm going to go ahead and write down 2, 30. Now I'm going to go ahead and move on over to our 3 and 45. So that tells me after day 3, 45 windows were repaired. So I'm going to go ahead and make that my next ordered pair. And I'm going to write down 3 for the x-coordinate and 45 for the y-coordinate. Now I also notice that I have a 4 and a 63. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to make that 4 and 63 my next set of ordered pairs. So the 4 represents once again the number of days, and the 63 represents how many windows were repaired after day 4. Now take a look at our last set of last set of data here. We have 5 and 79. So we're going to make that our last set of ordered pairs. So I'm going to write down 5 as the x-coordinate and 79 as the y-coordinate. And once again, that represents day 5. So after day 5, there were 79 windows that were repaired. Now, step number 2. We need to write a title for our coordinate grid. Now, when I look at our table, what I see is the table represents the number of windows repaired. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and label our coordinate grid also as windows repaired. So we're going to go ahead and write that down as our title, and I want you to also add the title onto your grid as well. So we're going to make that windows repaired. And every graph should have a title so we know what the focus of that graph is about. What are we looking at? Now our next step is going to be this. We now need to label each axis. So we're going to label the x-axis, and we're going to label the y-axis, or the vertical axis, as well. Now when I look back at my table, what I notice is this. I know that we have the days labeled as the x, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to label the x-axis as days, And then I also noticed that we have the total number repaired as our y. So going up the y-axis, we're going to label that as total number repaired. Now I'm going to go ahead and pause the video, and I want you to pause the video, and we're going to go ahead and label both the x and the y-axis. So go ahead and pause your video now, and then we'll check to see if our labels look the same. Now you should have the number of days recorded for the x-axis, and you should have the total number repaired as your y-axis titles. Now our next step is going to be this. Now we have to label the numbers for the x and also the numbers for the y. Now when looking back at our days in our table, what I notice is this. The days are listed as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what I know is I can count by ones and go ahead and label the x-axis. So here is going to be, and let's go ahead and begin to label. We'll label this as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now I'm going to look back at the numbers that represent the y, and I have a 14, 30, 45, 63, and 79. So what I know is I could count by tens, and that would make sense for me to go ahead and be able to grid or graph all of those numbers. So we're going to go ahead and along the y-axis, we're going to count by tens. So we'll start here, and we have our 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, and 80. And we can go ahead and stop there. Now our next step is going to be this. We now have to graph our ordered pairs. So we have our ordered pairs over here that we're going to go ahead and graph in our coordinate grid that has now been given a title, Windows Repaired. It has the x-axis labeled as days, the y-axis labeled as total number repaired, and then we also have the numbers that we're counting by for both the x and also the y. Now our first ordered pair is at 114. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to locate 114 on our coordinate grid. So starting from the origin, which is 0, 0, I'm going to come over 1, so we're counting over 1, and now we're going to go up 14. So here's 10. Now 14 is going to be close to the middle of our 10 and our 20, so we're going to go ahead and graph that point kind of right in between our 10 and our 20 here. So there is our 114. Now the next ordered pair is 2, 30. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to begin to move from the origin. We're going to come over 1, 2, and then we're going to go up 10, 20, 30, and we're going to go ahead and graph that point right there. So we're now over 2, and we're up 30, and we're going to graph the point right here. Now our next ordered pair is 3, 45. So that means from the origin, 0, 0, we're going to move over 1, 2, 3, and now we're going to move up 10, 20, 30, 40. Now 45 is going to be right in the middle in between the 40 and the 50. So we're going to go ahead and graph our point at 345. So we'll graph it right here, and there's 345. Now our next ordered pair is 4 and 63. So from the origin, we're going to move over 1, 2, 3, 4, and then up 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Now 63 is kind of right here, a little bit in between where you would find 60 and 60, or between the 60 and the 65. So we're going to go ahead and graph that ordered pair at 4 and then 63. So we'll graph it right about here. Now our next ordered pair is 5 and 79. So that means from the origin we're going to move over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we're going to move up 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. Now, we're going to move right down below that 80 to graph our 79. So then we have our 5 and 79. So we'll go ahead and graph that point together. So here is our 5 and 79. And we have now graphed the data based on those ordered pairs that came from our table, Windows Repaired. Now let's look at Part B. Part B says, what does the ordered pair 2, 30 tell you about the number of windows repaired? When I look at my table, what I know is this. The 2 represents the number of days, and the 30 represents the total number of windows that were repaired. So what that tells me is this. It tells me that after 2 days, 30 windows had been repaired. So I'm going to go ahead and write that down. So once again, it tells me that after 2 days. So we're going to write down after 2 days because once again, the X represents the 2, which represents the number of days. So after 2 days, we know that 30 windows had been repaired. So we're going to go ahead and write that down. 30 windows had been repaired. Because once again, the 30 represents the total number repaired. So 2 is the days, so 2 days, 30 represents the total number repaired, so it means that 30 windows had been repaired. Now your homework for tonight will be to complete question number 1, along with question number 2, as well as numbers 3 through 6 found in your Go Math workbook on page 188. Don't forget, somewhere on your homework page, we want you to assess yourself. Do you feel like you're number 1, a novice, number 2, an apprentice, number 3, a practitioner, or number 4, an expert? Don't forget, your homework for tonight is to complete question number 1 and question number 2, as well as numbers 3 through 6 found in your Go Math workbook on page 188. We hope you have a great evening, and we look forward to seeing you in class tomorrow.